This handsome man I have in front of me is Dr. Imran Tajuddin. For those of you who don't know, don't bluff, like you all know, like, that's why you're signed up. Right? He's assistant professor at the Department of Architecture in the National University of Singapore, where he teaches architectural history, theory, and criticism. His research areas include critical perspectives in urban heritage studies, vernacular urbanism, houses and mosque architecture in Southeast Asia, but most importantly, especially in the context of this session, place histories and the processes that underlie underlying motivations and assumptions through which notions of heritage have been constituted and how they are narrated in contemporary reconstructions and representations. So basically, in our current situation, we have a lot of assumptions based on places and sites. And I never get sick of Dr. Irman telling us that's wrong. This is actually what it means. So I hope to be corrected again today. Besides that, his other works also include, he's been engaged in a number of urban history and heritage documentation projects. This includes, most recently, he was the main consultant for the recovery and documentation of the historic graves at Jalan Kubo in Kampong Glam, just behind here, with Nusantara Consultancy. Dr. Imran is also one of the key movers and contributors of Singapore Stories, an independent collaborative platform which focuses on the recovery and sharing of architectural histories and the associated cultural memory of neighbourhoods, settlements, and communities that are no longer extant. Singapore Stories is committed to public education and sharing of these place histories through seminars and forums, much like this one. So for this talk, Dr. Imran will review the social history of the Bugis and Makassarese in Singapore, as seen from old maps indicating the neighborhoods, as well as pictorial evidence of the traditional houses, shop houses, and other buildings that were constructed by the community. So without further ado, I'll pass you in the good hand of Dr. Imran Tajuddin.
Thank you, Jamal. There's a bit of a juggling act that I have to do today. I'm going to try and do this recording and then hold the mic as well as use the cursor and hopefully everything doesn't fly out of my hands. But thank you everybody for coming on this Saturday afternoon. I'm going to try to do the impossible, which is try and finish this presentation within 1.5 hours. There's a lot that I want to discuss, but I think it's motivated by a number of concerns when we talk about the Bugis. These concerns will become clear as we go through the presentation. I'd like to start with this particular map right here. And if you look at it, I know it's a bit difficult for you to see, but it actually tells us Bugis, but it's spelled in a strange way. Bugguys is like Bugis. Bugis town extending to the eastern bay. And actually where we are is this square right now, Istana Kampung Glam, with the Sultan Gate. Today it's called Sultan Gate. Yeah? So this is actually, some of you might be familiar, it's on display in the National Library. This is the so-called Bute map, the map from the Isle of Bute in Scotland from 1820, the earliest map that shows some degree of detail of the land in Singapore. Even then, it's actually not detailed because I don't think it was scrubbed inside. It was probably occupied, but it seems to be a very waterfront-centric perspective. But I wanted to use this as a starting point to talk about the terms, Makassarese and Bugis. If we look at the early pioneers on this side of town, they included Makassarese, but because you need one label to talk about people from South Sulawesi, most often Makassarese, even though they speak a slightly different language, actually it's not mutually intelligible. They are brought together under one category, Bugis. So actually this Bugis town might as well have been called Bugis and Makassarese town, as will be clear soon. And the other thing, of course, is to, oops, sorry, what did I do? Yes, here. If you look at the percentages, so the Makassarese in South Sulawesi province, I'm not going to look too much at South Sulawesi, but just a run through. How many are Bugis today? Of course, this is 2010, so historically the numbers might have been different. Just a quick overview. But I mentioned that there are four main issues or topics that I will cover today, and they are as follows. Number one is that Bugis town we saw earlier, and early 19th century, and the very major upheavals in the urban form. And these changes are very important and largely forgotten actually when we talk about Singapore history. Singapore urban history in particular, but Singapore history in more general terms. We'll look at that later. It's a very significant part of Singapore history, but it's currently overlooked, and a lot of it concerns the Bugis and Makassarese. And then secondly, there was a this major upheaval led to the development of a new urban ward called Bugis Kampong in the Jackson plan, the colonial town plan, the second one that was developed actually, not the first, but the second. And it later developed into the ward called Kampung Rocho, and it has a number of streets with some significance. We shall look at that. And then the third section will be, we really, in this presentation, I hope to be able to really move away from a conception of the Bugis as this cultural other. The Bugis were very much involved in the urban economy of Singapore. They bought and traded shop houses, property, you know. It's not like this group of, I mean, later I will show you, there are actually official sources, Singapore ones, that say the Bugis are pirates all the time, habitually, as though that's the only thing they did, you know, and as though other people do not engage in piracy. So that kind of reductive stereotyping is a bit problematic, and I hope that Section 3 in particular will really shoo that kind of thinking away. And then finally, we come back to something very easy to stereotype. So we'll come back to this, okay, and then we'll end with that. It'll be quite fun. Anyway, let's move along. So the first part, I mentioned to you this, the Butte map of 1820. Now, slightly later, you have Captain James Franklin of 1822 giving us this map. Now, we compare these two maps. Sorry, I kind of blasted this map apart to show you the details. If we compare them, now there's a little bit of a road here. This street here is quite intriguing. It's reproduced in a number of maps. Apparently, where ACM is today, and this is Singapore River, this would be the Padang, there was a street that was always drawn in this particular manner. So there was a definite street running through the Temenggong's Kampong at the mouth of Singapore River where ACM Empress Place is today. And the palace is right about where Indochine used to be, or I think it's still there. So you can imagine the courthouse was actually built next to the Temenggong's Palace, Rumah Bicara. So there's a pre-colonial reason for why our first courthouse, not the current Supreme Court, the first courthouse, Maxwell House, was placed there because the Rumah Bicara had to be near Temenggong's house because the Temenggong was the Chief of Justice. So there's a very strong reason why it was there. So now I'm saying all this because the Temenggong, don't forget, he's actually part Bugis descent. So he enters our picture. The other thing, of course, is that Bugis town that we saw earlier, which is affirmed in this 1822 map. It says very clearly a Bugis town. And this Bugis town is further towards Fort Canning than where we are right now. This is Istana Kampung Glam. So this Bugis town is actually where Bugis Junction is today. But today there's no trace of it. And so on. So this map also tells us it's a Chinese town corroborated by this. It says here Chinese town in this map. And then there's a Malay town which is here corroborated by a very strange term, Sultan's Village, right about where Telok Ayer is today, where Tian Hock Keng, Al-Abrar Mosque, and Nagor Dargah are. So it's a bit interesting that there used to be a Sultan's Village. So I mentioned earlier the two Bugis, the two individuals, the one at Bugis Town, so-called. This is Bugis Town at Kampung Glam. So we are here right now at Istana Kampung Glam. This area, before Malays called it Kampung Glam, Orang Laut there apparently called it Seduyong. So this place actually has an older name. But the Orang Laut who called it Seduyong are themselves called Orang Gelam. Orang Gelam. So they are Gelam people, or the Gelam subgroup of Orang Laut, and they live at Seduyong, and later on everybody called Seduyong Kampung Glam, because Orang Gelam stayed here. So now we have this term with us until today. But at Seduyong or Kampung Glam was this person, a prince of Goa, who according to the Tufat al-Nafis, arrived in Singapore around about 1818. Actually, okay, let me correct that. Tufat al-Nafis does not say where he went. Tufat al-Nafis says that Kareng Chandapuli left Riau in 1818. Doesn't say where he goes. But we know that by the early 19th century, he, along with his wife Hajah Fatima, who is known for Hajah Fatima Mosque, are stationed there in Kampung Rochor, or next to Kampung Glam. So it seems very likely that he didn't go elsewhere, he came straight here, and there are several reasons for that. But there you go, you have this possibility, very strong possibility, when he left Riau in 1818, he came here. And that was actually preceded by Temenggong Abdul Rahman Daeng Ronggit, who decided in about 1811 or 1812 to leave Riau and Bulang with his son and settle here, and he administered Gambia and coconut plantations in his fief. Some of you might be familiar with this anecdote, that the British in Singapore were surprised to discover that there were 20 Gambia plantations in the interior of Singapore right about a few months after they settled here. You know, so it's not terra incognita or terra nullius. There were Gambia plantations, but it wasn't just Gambia plantations. There were coconut plantations all across the east coast. And the east coast of Singapore, from Tanjung Ru until Changi, is the highway to Johor River. So it's not, you know, some kind of a empty spot. So we have actually these, and I don't want to forget the fact that even before these arrivals, there were already Orang Laut. Now that's the other thing. There's always this kind of conflation between Bugis and Orang Laut. There'll be another point about this. They are different people. Okay, they are completely different, but they coexisted. Okay, and there was always some kind of a symbiotic relationship between them. Although if you read Leonard Andaya, who talks about the Bugis in the Malay Straits, the Straits of Malacca, he speaks of how it is also true that the Bugis, because of their dominance in the trade lanes, sea trade, displaced the position of Orang Laut in the Malay kingdoms. So you have both, right? It was symbiotic, but at the same time it was competitive, you know. So, I mean, if we look at it this way and don't start with 1819, then suddenly the story becomes rather different, doesn't it? We come back to this map, and then we note this letter from Raffles to the Duchess of Somerset, 18 June 1819. The Buginese have established themselves in considerable numbers on the margin of the Eastern Bay. He means, of course, our waterfront and beach road, near which His Highness the Sultan has also fixed his residence. Now, of course, the way he phrases it makes it sound like they only came after 1819. But there is another map, I'm not showing it though, that shows that there was a settlement already at Kampung Glam in 1819. And then, of course, if we look back at the other settlement that I showed earlier, this is oriented slightly differently, the Temenggong's Palace, where the ACM is today. It was labeled in this particular 1820 Butte map as Singapore Town. So they didn't really kind of see it as just a village, but at that point in time, they saw it as a town. The role of the Orang Laut, who stayed with the Malays in the entourage of the Temenggong, has often been overlooked. I want to bring up this particular problem. I know we are focusing on the Bugis, that would be the Temenggong, but the Temenggong had his community, which included, of course, the Orang Laut. There's a problem with it because in the River Gallery AM, the site of the Temenggong's Palace, you have this particular portrayal of the Orang Seletar instead of the Orang Laut of Singapore, and that these the involvement of the Orang Laut under the entourage of the Temenggong in the trade of the Singapore River is not properly treated. You know, if you read these testimonies and these accounts, the Orang Laut of Singapore River had a very integral role in the growth of trade and the attractiveness of Singapore as a port of call. They were part of the attraction. The services they provided were, very much appreciated by the traders. And that's something, again, we don't cover. I'm saying this because that's the River Gallery at ACM does not talk about this. It's supposed to be about the river. But the only thing about the Orang Laut and the Temenggong settlement that it says is this picture of Orang Seletar. That's completely wrong. It's still there today if you go there. So it's really quite bad. Coming back to, so we've established that these two nuclear settlements at the mouth of the Singapore River and the Bugis town were very early settlements preceding the kind of developments that we see even in these 1822 maps. So by the time you get to 1822, you have these two. This is the earlier Raffles Town Plan, which is often forgotten. In the earlier Raffles Town Plan, nothing much was changed. There's a British cantonment. He had already placed the British flag at the top of the Royal Hill, meaning he's taken over, right? That's the most symbolic way to take over. So then this becomes no longer the place where the Sultan can establish his court, but he has to take a second spot. Now that second spot happens to be where the Bugis were located, at Seduyong or Kampung Glam. Now the Chinese were mostly here, and there was another town or a settlement of the Malays down here. What happened is that there was a big change that affected one particular group in particular, the Bugis. So when Raffles decided in November 1822 to change the town plan, he wanted the Bugis to be shifted out of where they were to a spot beyond the residence of the Sultan. In other words, beyond Jalan Sultan, towards Crawford Road, towards the Army Market, yeah, that side, and Hajah Fatimah Mosque. So here's a quote. The Bugis, this is Raffles' instructions of 4 November 1822, Article 21. The Bugis settlers at present occupy the whole extent of Kampung Glam. Kampung Glam was the name that referred to all the way to Middle Road. That whole plain, it was a very attractive settlement site because the land was flat and good for building. Yeah, Kampung Glam Plain. So the whole extent of Kampung Glam to the mouth of the Rocho River, that means all the way to Crawford Road, Crawford Street. But it is conceived that they may be more advantageously concentrated on the spot lying beyond the residence of the Sultan. So they were asked to move away from this old Bugis town, that means where Bugis Junction is today, or roundabouts there, to the other side, around where Hajah Fatimah Mosque and the Army Market is. And so that's where we get here. So now this is European town in place of the old Bugis town. It was intended as a European town. So there was even a Rocho Square that was conceived, never came about. We don't have Rocho Square, right? It's supposed to be this very formal European settlement, very symmetrical. Never came about. Instead, what is European town is a very heterogeneous settlement along Middle Road. Middle Road was also the Jewish Mahalla, was also the Japanese town, was also Hainanese. The Hainanese Hoikan is there. Because the Europeans eventually moved away from town. They wanted a suburban setting. So it became heterogeneous, but the main point to take note of is that the Bugis were flushed out of this and will move beyond. Okay? And the space intervening, you need a buffer zone because you don't like these natives. So Europeans, you need to put Arabs. That was what they said. So you need, they didn't say it the way I said it, but it meant as much. So you need to insert somebody more civilized in European eyes, so Arab Kampung. Now notice the term Kampung is used to denote urban wards. That's really interesting. We'll say a little bit more about that. But suffice to say, with this map, it tells you Chinese Kampung right there, Chinese Kampung. Chulia Kampung is right there, where, what is it called? Central, Clarke Quay MRT station, right there. Right? Later it became the Teochew-dominated Ellenborough Market. Sin Pasat, which is no longer there. Ellenborough Market, right? But it's Sin Pasat. Pasar Baru in Malay. And then you have, of course, Arab Kampung, Bugis Kampung, and the Sultan's compound. The huge one. It's just called Sultan's. That's it. So this is the history behind the removal of the Bugis away from where they used to be. Right? And so when we look at this later 1825 map, about 2-3 years after the November 1822 instructions to move the Bugis out, you find the name Kampong Glam, between Middle Road and Arab Street. This is Kampong Glam. And then you have Sultan Mosque and the Sultan's house. So there was apparently a mosque that was where Pondok Jawa is today, According to this map, if you believe this map, the old mosque was actually nearer Beach Road before it moved. We do not know at which point. Nobody will remember because if this is 1825, none of us can trace an ancestor back to the 1820s, unfortunately. This is really a mystery, but apparently the mosque was situated in a kind of square facing the sea. So that made some sense in the traditional layout. But what's interesting is there's a plantation at the back of the Sultan's house. You know that behind you have Jalan Kubo, Jalan Kledek, Jalan Pisang, Jalan Penang. That alludes to the plantation. I've had this suspicion before, and I wrote it in a 2007 paper. But 2005. And then I was quite happy when I discovered this map much later, many years later, that there was indeed a plantation, meaning the royal gardens. Quite interesting. And then behind that, of course, would be the graveyard. But here you see Bugis Town's name has shifted. Where Bugis Town was initially over there, if you look at the older map, right here, right, on the other side of the palace. Now Bugis Town is written on this side of the palace, or Sultan's house, this side. So here becomes Kampong Glam. And that's a very important change. And on top of that, you have another Bugis village. That's Kampong Bugis. So don't confuse the two. They are completely different. Okay, there was a Bugis Kampong, which was called Bugis Town, which shifted from the old Bugis Town at Bugis Junction. Bugis everywhere. So it's a very important and major component of early Singapore urban history. Now when I put that, I'm just showing you the boundary of the present day Kampung Glam Heritage Conservation District. And that's Sultan Gate, and that's Jalan Kubo, and that's of course a cemetery. So this would be Victoria Street, this would be North Bridge Road, and what do you call that? Sultan Mosque would be where the letter O is, and we are here. Okay, just to give you an orientation. And then this would be Lavender MRT station. Today, the river has been straightened out as Rochor Canal. Okay, and so that's the move. Huh? So now, I mentioned to you the term kampong, and it's used in such an interesting way in the past, in English. Because you have Bugis town, the only spot in Singapore to be called a town. Bugis town. The rest are called Kampong Glam and Kampong China. And then there's also Panglima Prang's Kampong. So that's really fascinating. Obviously, the European map maker in 1825 decided that the Bugis settlement could be accorded the term town. Whereas even the Chinese settlement was called Kampong China. It didn't mean that it was a village. Remember, Kampong does not mean village. Kampong means urban ward. But the fact that this map maker chose to accord the term town to the Bugis tells us something, doesn't it? I'm sure it does. Yeah? I'm sure it does. Well, anyway, that's something for us to ponder. But as we move on, you go to Makassar. Let's go to Makassar, where a lot of the Bugis and Makassarese are from. A lot of the Bugis traders, when I mention Bugis, most of the time they are Wajok. Wajok is one particular subgroup of the Bugis. And then there's the Makassarese, who live in the southern tip of South Sulawesi. So there are two different peoples. There's the Bugis and the Makassarese. Among the Bugis, the most prominent traders are the Wajok. A lot of the traders in Singapore are Wajok. And likewise, when you go to Makassar, there's a lot of Wajok. Wajok. Kampung Peranakan sekarang tu Wajok. It used to be Peranakan. When here in Makassar, it's interesting. Makassar's Peranakan is very specific. It means Chinese Muslims. Intermarried or not, doesn't matter. They're just Muslim. So they call it Peranakan. It's very specific in Makassar. Only in Makassar is it used like that. And then there's Kampung Melayu. So there's Melayu in Makassar, alongside the Toajo Bugis. And there are other groups. Peranakan, Ende, and then Butung, and so on. So what I want to show here is, of course, the urban mosaic that you find in one particular quarter, the quarter of Kampung Melayu and Kampung Wajok, as shown in an 1818 map in Makassar. Now this should come as no surprise to us, because you find the exact same urban mosaic, fine grain in Singapore. So some of us will be familiar. In Kampung Glam, you have one particular street is Kampung Tembaga, another street is Kampung Kaji, another street is Kampung Jawa. Yeah, that sort of thing. So it's like this. Huh? So it's a kind of way in which people recognize subdivisions within. So it's so micro, it's fine-grained. So people lived amongst each other. Sometimes in a way that is subdivided on the map. So I find this really a fascinating mapping. And that is also reflected, and also recognized in the Singapore Town Committee of November 1822, which of course would have European merchant and officials, but it had representatives from, this is significant, the Malay, Chinese, Bugis, Javanese, and Arab communities. So we should throw CMIO out the window. No, I'm kidding. But apparently, what is this? MCB, it's difficult, I cannot. MCBJA. No, but I'm kidding. Then they have E on top, right? E is the big letter, European, right? Everything is European first. Or B, British, I don't know. Okay, but anyway, so jokes aside, this is the recognition of the heterogeneity of the community. It's quite significant that after, of course, you must place Malay first because they are the people of the land, and then Chinese because they are numerically they're big. The Bugis numbered only about 2,000. Only at that time, according to the census. So small, compared to the Chinese group, even at that early period. So, but they were important enough to be put there, along with the Javanese and the Arabs, of course. So it tells us something. These are details I won't go through too much, except to point out that in a letter of December 17, 1822, this is after the November 1822 Raffles instruction to flush the Bugis out, right? Remember, move them away so that it become a European town. So what was the request? They asked, can we please have this land around the Sultan's royal stockade, the Kota Raja. It was called the Pagar. And we have 20 principal men with a number of followers attached to each. This is what in Malay is called the Anak Buah settlement. right? There's a main person. And in Javanese, there's Makassarese, so there's an important person. And then people, the settlers stay around him. So that's forming one nucleus. So they have 20 nuclei, apparently, 20 principal men. And then please proportion the land, allot the land according to these principal men. I'm not sure if that was really exceeded to, so we'll take a look at what is the outcome later. Another instance of the recognition of the heterogeneity is that the Mosque Trustees Board of Sultan Mosque began in 1892. In 1912, decided to have a 12-member composition. So by 1912, this was put into place. Javanese, Bugis, Arab, Malay, North Indian, Tamil. Again, to recognize. So I want to stress that the Bugis are part of this larger heterogeneity, but they are quite a dominant force, even though their numbers are really small. I just want you to remember their numbers are really small, actually. They are really a minority within a minority. Nevertheless, by 1833, which is quite early in Singapore history, I've used this example before. You can download this for free. It's a PDF from National Library. A trilingual dictionary containing about 2,000 words, quite a massive undertaking, was published in Singapore to translate English into Bugis script, Bugis in Roman alphabets, and the Malay term for all sorts of things. I've chosen here to show building materials. So what does it look like? If you use Bugis script, I have the Bugis script at home, so I play around with it a little bit. So just so you to see what this is, so this is saying bata, this is batu apa, this is cepat, and then this is powale. So it's quite interesting that they, translate, they bothered to publish this in 1833. It tells us, again, it's a clue to something. The significance of the Bugis community in early Singapore. And morphologically also, and remember now, this is a very old work of mine, so I would probably redraw this differently, but there were about 20 compounds. So I'm trying to kind of allude to the fact that there are 20. The details of the instructions and wanting them to move across. This is the extent of the old Sultan's pagar that was later on reduced by 120 yards on each side. So you can trace it back through these old records. And then, because they're supposed to move across, the Bugis are now supposed to be removed from this side of Kampong Glam Plain to the relocated Kampong Rocho or Bugis Kampong. Slowly, the streets are laid out. And then finally, the old Kota Raja itself was torn down 2 times. Number 1 is the famous kink in the road. Lots of you will know this, because if it had gone by the grid, it would go right through where we are seated. And also would have led to the destruction of what is now Sultan Mosque. Because seriously, there was not supposed to be a grid, it was supposed to be a citadel. So now you want to cut it right through, and so that's what you have to do as a compromise. And then the other street, of course, is Victoria Street. What a name, huh? Victoria Street. That's colonialism. What I really like about the names given is that the Malays seem to know that this was slanted. They called it Jalan Condong. That's fascinating. That's now North Bridge Road. So every time you walk along that stretch of North Bridge Road, you can know, this is Jalan Condong. The Malays knew, okay? It went off-grid. They could have called this part Jalan Condong too, but they didn't apparently. And then there is Jalan Terang, Jalan Sesat, Jalan Sempit. I think they had fun. Jalan Sunyi, Jalan Pasar. Hey, macam mana ni? Jalan Pasar sebelah Jalan Sunyi. To the sini Bising, the other side Sunyi, Jalan Ramai, I don't know whether they were making fun of it or what. Jalan Ramai, Jalan Bugis. And then there was a kind of crossing from the end of this road. This later became Java Road, not Beach Road. Java Road, and a market was built right here by the colonial authorities, and it extended to Kampong Bugis Road, which is still there today. The street is still there. We've lost all of this. Everything except Haja Fatimah Mosque. It's a really important part of Singapore history. Just a quick run through what it looks like on the old maps, in case you think I'm bluffing about the names. Jalan Condong, Jalan Sesat, it's all there. This one, Jalan Condong, Jalan Sesat, Jalan Sempit. Now, they lost one of the names. This one shows it. This is Jalan Terang. I know I have a better scan than that. Jalan Terang, Jalan Sunyi, Jalan Pasar, Jalan Ramai, Jalan Bugis, which later got renamed, so there's a summary right there, into these names. So we are more familiar with Java Road, Palembang Road, Minto Road, these names appeared around about 1840s. Particularly, we know for sure it was already renamed by 1842. Now, I also want you to take note of this change in the river. Now, old channel, this is the old channel of Rocho River, and then this is the new cut. Some of you already know the answer. Where does this new cut of Rocho Canal go to? It's the longest canal project completed in early Singapore, early 19th century Singapore. Anybody knows? Where does Rocho Canal, if you trace it up, where does it go to? Danian Road, Bukit Timah Road. That giant longkang in the center is the upper reaches of Rocho Canal. It was already made by the 1840s. And who requested it? The colonial records tells us the Bugis traders requested for it. They asked the colonial authorities, can you please do something about this damn river? Make it a canal. And it was made into a canal, and it was navigable. I will show you another map later. And the Bugis used it for navigation up the river to run about where Sungai Road Market was. Sungai Road Flea Market had a history involving the Bugis as well, the barter trade. So it all falls together. There's a reason for that Sungai Road Flea Market as well. The Bugis had a role in that. And guess what? One of the famous Wajok Bugis traders, Haji Ambok Dalek Daeng Pasandre, his full name is Haji Osman Ambok Dalek Daeng Pasandre, was behind one of the retaining wall projects for that part. Now, this is today Lavender MRT and ICA building. There's a pedestrian bridge at the back, right? You can cross. When you are crossing, look at the embankment. There was a project there by a Bugis Wajok merchant in 1906. This one. So it used to be a very sharp kink. It was then straightened out. This is an earlier one. And so by the time he did it, he was repairing. So there was a repair made. Not that he made the whole thing, but he repaired it. But why was he repairing it? Because he owned property there, obviously. Why would he otherwise bother? Yeah? Quite interesting, because it's an infrastructure project. And then you get further clues. Oh, no wonder. The same man, Daeng Pasandre, had timber depots further up Rocho Canal. So along Rocho Canal Road, we know 2 of his timber depots. These are all both by him. Yeah? And so if you look at this image supplied by Khair Johari, who is seated right there. Thank you, Khair. His wonderful photo. That's his 2 timber depots right there, Daeng Pasandre. The ones we saw in the, yes, and there's Rocho Canal at the back. So this is Rocho Canal, sorry. Rocho Canal. Lady of Lourdes is still there, Lady of Lourdes. But everything you recognize around Lady of Lourdes is all padang jarak, padang tuko, we call it in Malay, right? Kosong, botak, you know? Nothing. We destroyed all of this. You know how bad Kampung Glam is as an isolated settlement? It's terrible. It's really the worst crime in heritage massacre in Singapore, seriously, what we have done to Kampung Glam. So it used to extend all the way, and this was Fatima Haji Harun JP's residence, where Golden Landmark is today, you know. A lot of things have disappeared. But anyway, I mentioned to you that the new cut was important for navigation. It's important enough for this large, now putting it into perspective, this large navigation map, navigation chart. If you zoomed in, it actually bothers to tell us the new cut for Rocho Canal. Huh? And all the street grid is correct, you know. It's correct, you can count them. Crawford, Jalan Sultan, Arab Street, yeah, you can count all the way, it's correct. So it's accurate, yeah. And that's actually Serangoon Road, and then Lavender, and then Kallang Road. So it's really quite a fascinating kind of detail that the new cut is so important for navigators. Tells us a bit, right? Sungai Road. That new cut right there, and the old channel. So actually, if you look at it in this larger perspective, I'm now zooming out from all our zoomed in detail. You know that the Kampung Rocho Malay street names, which have been entirely demolished, is very significant in the larger picture. No other part of Singapore has Malay street names like that. We've lost every single bit of it. And it's a Bugis part of town. We also know that this new cut, already by the 1829 survey, extends up to, yep, you guessed it, beyond Keng Lee. Beyond Keng Lee Road, beyond Newton. Goes up already. By 1829 survey, that big longkang in the middle of Danian Road and Bukit Timah Road was already done. And that's the upper reaches of Rocho River, okay, passing at the back of Kampung Glam and Kampung Rocho. Yeah, other images. So this one also shows you all the way up, see, if you didn't believe me, all the way up. That's already Danyan Road, Bukit Timah Road. Done already. Yeah? Very, very early. The tragedy, how did it get demolished? Most people will tell you, if they don't know the kind of hidden story, that, because of the master plan of 1962, the L'Orange plan, where precincts N1 and S1 was selected. S1 is outside of the historic area. You can see it used to be just plantation territory at Outram. So that's S1, where Outram MRT station is, the back of it. But here, you hit right smack in a historic district. That's N1 and S1, in case you're wondering. S1 and N1, 90 acres. Bugis Kampung. Gone. All of this, gone. Except Haja Fatimah Mosque. Everything else is gone. This is Haji Omar, Ambok Sulo's father, the house. This is Kota Alsagoff or Kota Nongchik, related to Haja Fatimah's family because her in-laws were Alsagoffs. So all of this was demolished. So that's what it looks like. This is under demolition. Another perspective from here, what was demolished. There's Haja Fatimah Mosque right there. Right? And that's where we are right now, here. And this is what it looks like today, right? Unrecognizable. So that's Bugis heritage and urban neighborhoods to you. End of story. No lah, there's more. I just wanted to make everybody and that's the embankment we were talking about just now, right? Where instead of being a V shape, it became a swerve, a turn. That's why we get articles like this. Bugis, meaning Bugis Junction or Bugis MRT station, bears little trace of the people who once lived there. Here's what you need to know about them. I love all these articles that give you clickbaits like that, right? Here's what you need to know about them. I love it. But Singapore's historical Bugis urban settlements extended far beyond Bugis Junction. We've seen that. So Bugis Junction, this is a summary of what we just seen. Bugis Junction is the pre-1824 Bugis town. By 1822 November, they were asked to move, but they kind of stayed on until about 1824. There's a forgotten quarter, completely demolished, next door to us, beyond Jalan Sultan. And that is the Kampung Rocho district, or as it was named in the Jackson Plan, Bugis Kampung, developed 1824 to 27. And then there are other areas across Singapore town too, where we can find the investments and urban property of Bugis individuals, Bugis and Makassarese individuals. Let's take a quick look. So here's just another, because, what does it actually look like, that area that has been demolished? A closer look, all the shop houses. Can you imagine if this was still there? How different Kampung Glam would be. This is more than twice, this is about twice the size of what is Kampung Glam today. Lost, Lost. Yeah, just imagine, just how terrible it is, right? It's really terrible. I've never gotten over this. I started this research back in 2004 and I've never gotten over it. Never. And I cherish every opportunity to talk about this because I think more people need to be aware of it, what happened. I'm not saying we can recover it, just if you go to Haja Fatimah Mosque today and look around you, you'll be anguished to think this is everything around it, really anguished. So, this is the context. I just wanted to show, and the list, is too complicated, but you'll be happy to know you can go to singaporestories.com website and you can find these and you can download it. It's free for you to download. A high resolution image. I made it deliberately like that. So this is what it looked like if you were to be able to walk along Java Road and pause right here and look. It would look like that. Now look at these shop houses. These shop houses are quite old. So old, they didn't even have the 5-foot way. And they had the very interesting window opening, which we can find in Basra Street, by the way. There's still some that preserve it, right? URA tells them to keep it. I think some flouted the rule and demolished it or something. And then you look at this very simple early shop house facade, just a small jendela. It's still a jendela, meaning that there's a balustrade, but it's very small and there's only one of it and it's otherwise quite plain. This is the small one. There are bigger shop houses, of course. I mean, if you look along this street, these are the small ones. There are bigger ones around. But it happens to be that these belonging to the property of Haja Fatimah, are the small ones. Now, besides Haja Fatimah, of course, Haja Fatimah is of Bugis descent. Her full name tells you this. She uses the Arabic patronymic format, Al-Bugisi. Al-Buqisi, actually, she uses qaf. Al-Buqisi, the Arabic does not have a G sound. But then again, Al-Sagaf is actually Al-Saqaf. So in Yemeni Arab, in Yemeni dialect, in Hadrami dialect, the qaf, Q sound is G. So we don't call them Al-Saqaf, we call them Al-Sagaf. So likewise, Buqisi becomes Bugisi, you know, in like a manner. So anyway, Hajah Fatima is Bugis, but this is her daughter. This is her husband's name, Kareng Chandrapuli. You might remember Kareng Chandrapuli, the Makassarese noble, prince actually from Goa in Makassar. So this is their daughter, Rajasiti. She endowed these 5 units. It's very familiar, right? It's just across the road. So these are for Hajah Fatima Mosque, Mecca Mosque, Medina Mosque, Taif Mosque in Yemen, the poor Sharifas at Hadramaut, and balance to poor relatives in Singapore or elsewhere and other charitable needs. So that's the wakaf for this. I don't know how much they maintain. This is really small. Maybe they send only annually because you can't be sending $10 or maybe even now by transfer. I don't know. But you see, $10 in 1891, 1883 will is a big sum. Today, $10 is nothing, but $10 back then, can you imagine 1883? Now, we're going to look at, we've already looked at 2 Bugis female endowers of property. Third Bugis female endower of property, Fatimah binti Daeng Lahalida. 3 units at Niven Road. Income for the proper upkeep, maintenance and repairs of Ba'alwi Mosque. Those of you who know mosque ecology in Singapore would know Ba'alwi Mosque is seen as the main Hadrami Sayyid Mosque. But guess what? There's a pewakif or wakaf giver who is actually Bugis for the upkeep of the mosque. And a female merchant too, Fatimah binti Daeng Lahalida. Last one, Hajah Daeng Tahira. She's got a lot, but I checked. Some are acquired, some have been demolished because of land acquisition, and as is usually the case in Singapore, those acquired property is just empty. They've been empty for the last 20 odd years. This is at Kelantan Lane, Kelantan Road, you might know. You know Jalan Bersih Food Center? Kosong what, that one? A long time already, but it used to be her wakaf property. I'm not sure why they got demolished. But it is shared, half-half. The other half is another Bugis person, a man. And this is the I won't go through it though, but these are what the income is for. Now coming back, so we come back to Hajah Fatima, one of the 4 Bugis female benefactors. During the demolition, this is what took place. You can imagine the pain of one by one by one by one. The shop houses were dismantled, can you see? And all the timbers were salvaged by the construction company. I wonder what they did with the salvaged timber. One by one by one, hundreds upon. If we lived through that era, some of you did, I wonder how you would have felt. Can you imagine the hundreds of shop houses in the Bugis part of town? Now, looking at the minaret though, so it's the only thing that survives from 1840s. The minaret is a rather strange, interesting building, isn't it? It seems that the idea behind the minaret was to kind of build something like that. But I suppose because, you know, the architect was British, so you get something that looks very much like a steeple. And it also leans, right? So we have the leaning steeple of Hajah Fatima Mosque. It's really interesting. But the idea, it seems, was to kind of do something similar to this kind of a minaret. You have other examples, not very similar. So although the later the later custodians of the mosque are Hadrami Sayyids, if you compare it with Hadramaut kind of minarets, it's rather different. Plus it's too late because it was actually firstly endowed by Hajah Fatima, not yet by the Al-Sagafs. Just to give a quick explanation, the Al-Sagafs married the Al-Sagafs are related to the descendant of Hajah Fatima, Raja Siti, her daughter, by marriage. So that's why they are connected through the mosque. And today they are still the custodians of the mosque. Other comparisons with minarets as well as other elements of the mosque, the gateway, and then let's say library buildings and so on. So you get these 2 elements in Hajah Fatima Mosque. Quite unique in the Singapore mosque architectural landscape because not many mosques in Singapore have gateway and library building like that. But they don't date to the 1840s. If you look carefully at the library building, for example, 1330 Hejira is 1911 or 1912. So apparently these were either renovated or added later, 1911, 1912. Next door to the mosque, so this is the mosque, if you climb up the minaret and you look down from the minaret is here, you'll be able to see this next door. This was the very famous, for those who live there, Kota Nongchi or Kota Al-Sagaf with these bungalows inside. So this is the big one, and this is the compound house next to it. It's called Kota Nongchi because these are, in fact, because of the marriage with Raja Siti, Arab Bugis Pranakans, meaning that they are half-half. And they inherited this aristocratic Bugis title Nongchi because of Raja Siti binti Karang Candapule, because of her royal blood. So Raja Siti it's interesting because Karang is a Makassarese royal title. But his daughter took the title Raja. Raja is only used by Bugis in Malay countries. In Malay countries, people with Bugis nobility use the title Raja, but not in Sulawesi. So then you get a transference, right? First you have a Karang, which is South Sulawesi, True Blue Makassar. And then you have Raja, which is only used by Bugis in Malay contexts. And then, of course, their child takes on the title Nongchi, which is a Bugis kind of honorific. So Nongchi is also well known for being the person behind the endowment for the Keramat Habib Noh Hilltop Mausoleum. And next door to it, I'm just talking about how the Bugis cannot be seen in isolation. So it's not just the Bugis Arab family or Arab Bugis family of Nongchi, but also next door is this Malay from Batavia, Jakarta. This is the son of the person who endowed the mosque. So it's always this kind of collaboration. And if you remember the old map, that part of Singapore was called Malay Town. That part of Singapore at Teluk Ayer and south of it was called Malay Town, which is rather fascinating. Yeah, so it seems that there's what is the Malay Town there? What clues? It seems that this is one of them. There was also a Malay press nearby at a street called Sambau Street, which is no longer there. There was a Malay matba'ah or press. Now we talk about another. Now, this is the thing that is a hot potato, because it seems that the colonial records have not given us affirming evidence to prove that Hajah Fatimah did indeed acquire a 100-acre plot at Gelang Serai. So I remember there was this person who said, no, there's no record of it. But the Alsagoffs, who owned the land later, right? They owned the land until the government acquired it in 1972. The Alsagoffs, who is interrelated to her by marriage, they inherited her property through Raja Siti, have a family tradition that insists the person who first bought Gelang Serai was our Puang Fatimah, Hajah Fatimah, our ancestor Fatimah. Not us. We didn't buy it. She bought it first. So who do you want to believe, colonial records or the Alsagoffs? I don't know. But we do want to try and find the... So apparently that's what happened. So in the 1830s, Hajah Fatimah acquired a 1,000 plot of land right there. 1,000 acre plot of land. And of course, where she is, that's Hajah Fatimah Mosque there at Kampung Rocho. Right? You could go either by sea, by river, or by 1831, Gelang Road had already been built. 1831, that early. We all think Singapore was jungle. Nonsense. Really nonsense. If you really knew the history, you'd be like, what nonsense? By 1831, you could already drive to Changi Point. You could drive there, but no, nobody drove, of course. What I mean is, you can ride. You can ride a horse carriage. Later, we'll see some Bugis investments in horse carriages and horse stables. But anyway, so this is the situation at that time. And at that time, it was still Gelang Kelapa before it became Gelang Serai. And I want you to take note of the property lines. This is not the best map, but the property lines go in a kind of arc. So it comes in at an angle, right, where Paya Lebar Road is. This Paya Lebar Road, Paya Lebar MRT is right here. So the property lines come in at an angle. This is Wak Tanjong, who is also Bugis. Wak Tanjong had some property here and subdivided it. Later we'll just remember that it's coming in at an angle. Let's move on. So you can kind of see the property lines there. But just to give you an idea of the distance, those are the MRT stations. Yeah, and the distance between Hajjah Fatimah Mosque and Kampung Rocho with Geylang Serai. I wonder what she had in mind, Hajjah Fatimah, when she bought the property at Geylang Serai. But you know, the rest, as they say, is history. Geylang Serai is the other Malay center in Singapore. Besides Kampung Glam, you have Geylang Serai. And both are connected via Hajjah Fatimah. Yeah? It's really interesting. Just another map to show the extent of coconut plantations when it was the heyday. And later on, though, her name, Hajjah Fatimah, does not come up, but instead her descendants, the Alsagoff side. Yeah? So Lorong Engku Aman and Jalan Alsagoff were named in the 1930s. So now we have Lorong Engku Aman and Jalan Alsagoff is not even kind of given a replacement name, but Lorong Engku Aman is now the name of a car park entry road. Because, you know, whenever in Geylang Serai, they've demolished so many things, and like it's very rare in Singapore to find large surface car parks. But in Geylang Serai, you can find that. You know, like we are in American suburbia, right? Huge open air car parks. I don't know why it is that when you get Malay areas, you get open air car parks. I'm very surprised, you know. Yes, so, you know, it's just open air car park, and the car park entrance road is called Lorong Engku Aman. But it was with a gap. So for a long time, Lorong Engku Aman disappeared from the face of the earth. Very dramatic. But yeah, there you go. There's Jalan Alsagoff, Lorong Engku Aman. And then I mentioned to you, Kampung Wak Tanjung. If you look at the lorongs of Geylang, they start to swerve in this inexplicable direction. And Kampung Wak Tanjung as a road actually extends much further. It's not shown here. So it is a trace of the old property lines when Wak Tanjung owned the land and subdivided it according to a particular direction. We don't understand what it is. But it so happens that that direction faces Mecca. I don't want to make any conjecture at this point, but it so happens maybe he just wanted to divide it in that manner because people wanted their homes to be oriented that way, easy to, you know, perform their prayers. I don't know, I'm speculating. This is completely wild speculation. But it so happens that direction is the direction of Mecca. Kampung Wak Tanjung. Of course, the road is gone today, but if you look at Madrasah Wak Tanjung, do you notice it's got a funny triangular wedge plan? And that's because it follows the old road direction. So we must keep that triangular shape. You know, don't you agree? It's a historical legacy. We'll go to Jalan Pagat later. He's another Bugis individual. Coming back to town, so we were kind of doing an excursion in Geylang Serai for a while, right? So we are back. We took the tram back along Geylang Road. And now we are back in town, right? The tram would arrive somewhere here, you know, and then we alight. It goes here. It goes along North Bridge Road. And so we alight. Now we're going to look at a number of the real estate, coming back to real estate again, of the Bugis individuals. We've seen the embankment. We've seen the two timber depots owned by, it's over here actually. There's something else. And we're going to look at a few. We've seen Kota Nongchi, and then we're looking at a number of other properties. So one of them would be Dayang de Sarwa, one of the earliest I could find. This is just a sampling. So 1893 at Jalan Kelapa, he built what is called a rumah gudang, or godown house. So the ground floor is used as a godown or warehouse, and then you live upstairs. And you have another example. I mentioned to you, we would be using, of course, not a car, we'll be using horse-drawn carriages, and the Bugis were involved in both the import of horses, because the Bugis had trade settlements. Their competitors were the Arabs. So Hadrami Arabs as well as Bugis were competitors in the import of horses to Singapore and elsewhere. And the Bugis for this trade had settlements in the sources for horses, which are the Nusa Tenggara Islands just east of Lombok. So you buy horses from the islands just east of Lombok. And the Bugis had a number of trade agents there to import horses and to keep them in. So they of course had to build coach houses and stables. So this is like a bus depot, if you like, you know. Here is a 1909 project at Sumbawa Road. These are, and you notice, do you notice what this is? Yeah. I was jumping for joy when I first saw this, you know. It is. Yeah, so, and here as well, look. It is as well. So both of these belong to Haji Omar. Here it's spelled Haji Huma. Haji Omar is his full name, Haji Omar Ambot Haji Omar Ambot Dae. Yeah. No, that's Daeng Pesandre is another person, his brother. So this is very confusing. There's his brother who built the embankment, right? Haji Osman Ambot Dale Daeng Pesandre, who has the domed mausoleum in Jalan Kubur. This is his brother, Haji Omar Ambot Dae, not Dale, Dae. And then it stops there. He doesn't have a Daeng something. I think he didn't acquire one or something like that. Because it's just an addition. Daeng something is just addition. It's not your name. His name, he was born Haji Omar. His name is Omar. So then the Bugis have all these additions to their name. Very fancy, you know. I wish I could have like fancy additions to my name. I'm just Imran, you know. So these are both by Haji Omar. He has written Haji Omar bin Ali. That's the simplest way to do it. His father is Haji Nakhoda Ali Daeng Matara. That's the full Bugis name. He's a Daeng Matara. Later you see somebody with Matara. So that's another brother of theirs. So this kind of business empire in one particular Bugis family. So besides Haja Fatima's family, there's also this family. The children of Haji Omar, the children of Haji Nakhoda Ali Daeng Matara, including Haji Omar. So Haji Omar is the father of Ambot Sulo. So he's most well known because of that. Ambot Sulo became famous because he was one of the commissioners and also one of the members of the, what do we call that committee? Just like Yunus Abdullah, I forget suddenly. Sorry again? Municipal, thank you. Yes, he was a municipal commissioner. He was part of the municipal committee. And as well, Ambot Sulo is also a member, one of the founding members of the Kesatuan Melayu Singapura, or the Singapore Malay Union. So he's quite well known. Not Haji Omar, but his son, Ambot Sulo. So Ambot Sulo became famous. Haji Omar was a not so well known businessman father, as usual, right? The first generation. Yeah, so is Ambot Sulo's. Yes, we'll look at that later. Yeah. So this is the brother, Haji Osman, but he chose not to put his real name or his personal name. Omar did, but his brother Osman did not. So Haji Osman, his brother, put his title, Haji Daeng Pesandre Ambot Dale. That's the brother, the one who built the embankment, some of his projects. So he owned one unit at Arab Street that apparently burnt down by fire and had to be rebuilt. And then a few others. This one is Daeng Pesandre collaborating with Shai Alkaf to do up these 4 units that are found back to back, facing Beach Road and Java Road. And then you have this is another sibling of theirs, but to confuse you, instead of saying Bin Ali, he puts Daeng Matara, which is the title of the father, Ali. But it's the same. So they're all these 3 brothers. Haji Samsudin. But because of the way Bugis script is written, Samsudin becomes Samasudi. Samasudi Daeng Matara. So they don't, because of the way the script is written. And what I'm surprised is that it's actually put into English. Instead of saying that's how the Bugis pronounce it, they actually put it into, Roman orthography, to actually reflect how the Bugis would read it if they wrote in Bugis script, Samasudi, not Samsudin. Yeah, I thought that was quite fascinating. But this is another stable and coach house project at Minto Road. And then one more person not related to the rest, apparently. This is Andik Makga. Andik is another kind of title. It's a title now. Daeng is not. Daeng is what they call Tau Deceng, which is like a respected or honored person. Right? Correct me if I'm Tau Deceng. Right? But Andik is a little bit more than that. Andik is kind of an honorific title. Andik Makga bin Datu, and Datu is very high. Datu Lapaju. Apparently this Datu Lapaju is the Datu Lapajung Riluwu. So we have probably one Bugis from Luwu, yet another group, different from the Wajo. So I like the lettering, quite interesting. The lease is for 999 years, mind you, but then it was demolished anyway. Andik Makga bin Datu Lapaju, bought 999-year lease, and then come 1970 something, what happened? Demolished. And then they tell us, because theirs was all temporary lease, nonsense. It's not. It's 999-year lease. Demolished. And others, because it's so tiring to see so many drawings, so let's just list it. So it's not just Bugis. Again, I want to emphasize you can plot the Bugis in relation to other groups. So for example, with the Malays. So here's a Malay person, right, at Kampung Melaka, which is where? Where's Kampung Melaka? Kampung Melaka is where MOM building is. Yeah. And Masjid Omar Kampung Melaka is there. I didn't put the slide I usually put, but even the Hokkiens and Teochews would call it Kampung Melaka. Some of you might be familiar. So in dialect, they would call Angus Street, Cumming Street, Fisher Street, Kampung Melaka, in acknowledgement of the Malay name. You know? And then there's Haji Muhammad Said bin Daeng Patompo at Kereta Air, sold to a Chinese for 26K, not bad, huh? Haji Ambut Dalit Daeng Pesandre, sold in 1929 to another Bugis, Muhammad Tahir bin Haji Lahalida, for these sums, and so on. Sago Street, sold by Daeng Pesandre to Lim Tek Chew, and then to all these individuals, all these Banda Street, Sago Street. These are all in what we today call Chinatown, Kereta Air. So if you plot it, we're talking about these streets. Banda Street is this one, Sago Street, Sago Lane, South Bridge Road, Cross Street. Today, the landscape is understood as Chinatown. MRT is Chinatown, Chinatown Heritage Center. We ignore these two, right? Not Chinese, ignore. Turn, after you come here, you turn or you just walk past, Bok Bodoh. And then you go here, Buddha Tooth Relic Temple, Chinese. Chinatown Visitor Center, confirm. Okay, let's go home. That's what we've done to our historical landscape. Actually, it's a lot more diverse. So the number of properties there that were owned by the Bugis, include. But of course we know it's not, the locals don't call it Tangren whatever. It's not Chinatown, right? It's actually called something else, Gucha Chui, Kereta Air. It's just like the transliteration of the term. An example, just one, okay, just indulge in one. So Daeng Pesandre at Banda Street, which is in Chinatown, or Kereta Air. Now, there's also this interesting figure of Haji Abdul Samad bin Haji Daeng Paga, Bugis, but he is recorded as Singapore's first Malay doctor because so many minority groups in the end CMIO. So Bugis become Malay, right? So he is the first Malay doctor, actually he's Bugis. First Malay doctor not in all of the universe, but first Malay doctor in the colony of Singapore. Since the medical college was established in Singapore, many Malays have obtained their medical diplomas from it, but most came from Johor and other native states. Dr. Abdul Samad, however, is the first local Singapore Malay to qualify as a medical. That's a point of clarification. Only in Singapore, we were late. Melayu Singapura memang bermasalah, I'm kidding, There's always this joke, right? Singapore Malay all got problem, we are always very slow, underperforming. Even our first Malay also not Malay, Bugis, and then later than the Malay states, alamak. But anyway, they were very happy, so they had a dinner at Victoria Memorial Hall. Check that out. By the Kesatuan Melayu Singapore Malay Union for 100, including the governor, Hugh Clifford. But I'm a bit surprised because it says here the governor in his 1828. So, sorry, no, correct. I'm not surprised, sorry. I'm saying the governor is Hugh Clifford in 1828. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So here is just a quick dedication. I interviewed the late Mr. Ismail Said, so thank you very much to him. May he rest in peace. He interviewed him in 2014 because he is the nephew of Dr. Abdul Samad Daeng Paga. With thanks to Mok Ismail and Dahlia, who is here in attendance. So I interviewed him about his experience working at the clinic of his uncle. So the Dr. Abdul Samad bin Haji Daeng Paga, the first Malay doctor in Singapore, opened a dispensary of all places in Cross Street, Chinatown. 186 South Bridge Road. He did not choose to open it in a traditional Malay area. He opened it in a place with a lot of Cantonese and so on. And a lot of his clients were actually Cantonese. So he said that he learned the language in order to better communicate with and he provided services for free for those who could not afford it. Quite interesting, Quite interesting. So anyway, that's an interesting snippet. So just now we mentioned Jalan Paga and Jalan Ambok Sulo. Jalan Ambok Sulo, sorry, I'm really sorry, but it got cropped out because it's actually here. I'm sure you know. Jalan Ambok Sulo is right here. Yeah, so next to Jalannya here, right? Sorry, I got cropped out, but it's here. Jalan Ambok Sulo and then Jalan Paga. But I thought I wanted to bring up Jalan Paga because fewer people know Daeng Paga. Daeng Paga is the father of Dr. Abdul Samad. So Dr. Abdul Samad is better known, but his father is not as well known. So his father is Haji Daeng Pagak bin Daeng Army, who is Bugis and one of the founding members of the Singapore Malay Union in 1929. So his name is commemorated in some streets. Okay. So, and then some other kind of examples of civic participation, just a sampling. This is just a random sample that you can find them, these Bugis names in, for example, the Malaya Tribune of 1927. And then finally, this is another, just to reinforce the point, the range of property owned or the geographic distribution. Cross Street, Banda Street, Sago Street, Sago Lane, South Bridge Road, that's in Kereta Ayer. So it seems that they were concentrated around there. And then you have Highlam Street, Bugis Street. That's actually Bugis Junction. So the Bugis did indeed own property in what is today Bugis Junction. Yeah, Highlam Street, Bugis Street. And also some shophouse plots, quite a number actually, at Crawford Road and Kallang Road, quite a big, sizable amount. And then the conventional areas you would expect Bugis-owned shophouses to be, Arab Street and so on. This is actually this is research done by Daeng Paleweng. Actually, this is a pseudonym. He has his own name, but he decided to obscure his name and put Daeng Paleweng, which is not actually his name. Okay, I've got about 15 minutes. I think we're good for time. I hope everybody is okay. It's a little bit tiring. Now we go to something close to my heart. It's Jalan Kubor. Some of you might know that I was with the team. I led a team of people to do the backbreaking and horrible work of, it's tiring work, not horrible, it's tiring work of documenting the gravestone and the site at Jalan Kubor, which is actually just here. What's the direction? Behind, there. Yeah, there, behind, across. And, we were expecting some interesting nuggets, but we were not expecting what we found. You remember the maps tell us that Bugis town used to be the main settlement around here. And there are indeed so many gravestones with Bugis, Sulapa Epak, the script. So many. It really reinforces and substantiates the maps that tell us it's Bugis town. So many gravestones have Bugis script on them. It's very rare. So we've got something really interesting here. Really interesting. Some of them are bilingual. So remember Daeng Pesantren? So this is his mausoleum right there. He's the one inside the fence. Next to him is this grave of a daughter of Daeng Patompok, one of the other merchants. And it's bilingual on the headstone. Sorry, this is the headstone. On the headstone is Jawi and Arabic, is both. And then on the footstone is, well, besides the formula, Bismillah, you also have Bugis script. And then it says there, God on high, Allah Ta'ala. But other than that, it's Bugis. And then here is Sanat, the year. And then Arabic numerals. But other than that, it's Bugis script. Other examples, well, this is Ambok Sulo's father, Haji Omar Ambok Daik, his mausoleum building. I kind of like how it looked like in 2007. I don't like how it looks like today. It needs to be, like, this thing needs to be removed. It's horrible. It's like Pasar Malam, Not nice, lah. So this, so I'm glad I have this 2007 photo. This is also 2007, before somebody came along and did these renovations. Okay, now you can sit down. I mean, I'm not laughing at it, but I just feel that it shouldn't be. And some people are starting to say this is a kramat. It's a merchant's son. A lot. He's many things, but maybe I don't know whether we should allow this to happen. It's not done by the family, mind you. Done by strangers. So even the family is surprised. No, we didn't do this. We didn't add these things. Somebody else added them. Of course, they allow it to be, but I don't know how they feel about it, because that's their grandfather or granduncle. And this is the interior of the mausoleum. If you enter inside, so this is back in 2012. They didn't paint. See, this is interesting. The color scheme, right? Outside is green in 2007. 2012 becomes blue. Inside is both green and blue. In 2012, they decided, alah, frame sudahlah. Blue. Then the rest, tinggalkan hijau, no? Leave it green. But anyway, I kind of, but anyway, here's a snapshot. I don't know what color it might be inside now, but these are the two gravestones of Haji Omar Ambok Daik and wife inside. So this Haji Omar Ambok Daik, the merchant, and the wife. Again, headstone in Jawi and Arabic, footstone in Bugis script. So I was saying how, this Bugis town thing is corroborated. It used to be Bugis town here, Bugis town there, and it's corroborated by the grave that you find in Jalan Kubor. So many of these, As yet, Wafi, you're here, right? Wafi, we couldn't, mana Wafi? Wafi, we couldn't really read because it's too, what do you call this? Too house, too eroded. Yeah, that's the word, too eroded. So it's a pity, but we know these two are Bugis. This is the one we don't know, alien writing. Because it's not Bugis apparently, right? It's don't know, but it looks like Bugis, but a little bit odd. It's Bugis, but it's a little bit odd, and we couldn't read most of it, right? Some of it we could read, some of it we could not. But it's really quite interesting. This particular one, the orthography is a little bit different. Other examples, these are just the examples. So how Bugis script is used. This is really interesting and very rare. Yeah. So this is an important site, okay, in Singapore history. And if we mapped out, this is just hobby, okay, so, you look at all the merchant princes and the respectable individuals, what rank and title and honorifics they used, from Daeng to Andi to Ambo and to Karang and Arung. I didn't really mention Arung Belawa because you can find it. Every single reference about the Bugis will tell you only one thing. Arung Belawa came in 1820 with his large fleet. The British and everybody thought they were pirates, but no, they were not. They actually fought the Dutch, and so they were angry. They came to Singapore. They were nice people, so we let them settle at Kampung Bugis. The end. Yeah. Every single source you find about the Bugis will tell you Arung Belawa sailed in a big fleet in 1820. Everybody thought he was a pirate, but he was not. Which is an exception, which is not an exception. Most of the Bugis are not pirates anyway. So then he settled at Kampung Bugis. So we're going to go on to Kampung Bugis next. Okay, so maritime heritage. This is the last chapter in our last 10 minutes. This is the part which everybody knows. Yeah, Bugis, pirate, ship. I know about the Bugis. This is that part. Maritime heritage, So of course, everybody knows about the sailing prowess. So I wanted to show a completely different side earlier. The whole of this lecture, except this last 10 minutes, was about something else, right? Land-bound and all that. And plantations. But then you also, of course, undeniably have the Bugis maritime and seafaring prowess. They were wealthy because they could continue what the Malays and Javanese could not continue. And what is that? To trade across the archipelago when the Dutch didn't allow it in the 1600s and 1700s under monopoly law. The VOC, or the Dutch East India Company, was in force until 1799. So during that period, from 1619 when they conquered Batavia, all the way until 1799, about 200 years, the seas were basically what the Dutch said is ours. You're not supposed to take over our spice monopoly. That's ours. We've conquered Makassar. So the Dutch conquered Makassar in 1669, and that dispersed Makassarese and Wajok traders across the archipelago. I didn't talk about this earlier, but that was one of the reasons they took to the seas in big bands. They've lost their main port. And with that port, they could no longer conduct trade safely to the Spice Islands. Just imagine your own home region. You are not allowed to trade what your region produces. And you call them pirates? Hello? Whose side are you on, Orang Putih? I'm not surprised because I'm speaking to you in Orang Putih language. So, ironically, that is our predicament. We have not moved beyond the damn perspective. It's really terrible. So when we see this, what do we see? Pirate fleet, Arung Belawa. Not pirate. Okay. You guys are different. Okay, can come settle. Let's move on. Fun, right? Up to 1975, apparently, at Kallang Bay, you can still find the Bugis vessels. Until 1975. By this time, they would have been also semi-motorized by 1975. Beautiful 1950s photos. Cantik, But you know what? By 1980s, we shoot them away again. The second time in history, the Bugis were shoot away. They were shoot to West Coast Butter Trade Port. So you can't see them anymore. And I don't know where they are now. They're still apparently bartering, doing some barter because the kind of goods that they bring is not lucrative enough if you exchange it with money. Okay, they bring things like wood, lumber, and what else? Miscellaneous things, rattan. Yeah? So they continue this kind of a niche trade today. And many of them actually are kept to the barter, not Bugis only, other archipelago traders from around our region, like the Malays of Sumatra and Riau. They don't actually go through Indonesian passport channels because they're so near us. They would have to patah balik, they would have to U-turn to get Indonesian authorities chopped, and then they come to Singapore. They're already like that, so they just come direct. So Singapore has a different provision for these traders. They come direct, they go through a different processing. Interesting. Because Indonesia is so huge. The Malays who live nearest us are at the fringes, the forgotten fringes of Indonesia, the gigantic archipelago. So some of them just come direct. Apparently, this is what I read. I'm not sure about it because I have not actually. But sometimes if you take number 30 or number 10 along Pasir Panjang Road, you will see, I don't know whether any of you notice, yes, you see the Indonesians, the way they speak, you know that they are Malays from Riau. Different. They are Malay and they speak in a very Riau way. Like, wow, this is what my grandma used to speak, in my case, because they are from Riau. So it's okay, there they are. Okay, so this maritime heritage is still with us. It's just hidden somewhere. I don't know where. I really would like to know, but it's on our old $10 note. And on our old $2.15, very cute, Golekkan. Golekkan is Madurese though. I'm just putting it to give a complete picture of the maritime trade. So this is a very interesting quote by Horridge, saying that the Madurese trader Golekkan was once a familiar sight from Singapore to Kupang in Timor, but is rarely seen nowadays except along the north coast of Madura. So apparently, I think these don't sail to Singapore anymore. What we get in Singapore are the Riau Nade, for example, other kinds of boats, not just the Bugis Palari. This is the maritime, so there's the other half. If you remember that first quote, the Bugis have established themselves along the coast of the Eastern Bay, right? So this is the Eastern Bay. In other words, Kallang Bay. And this is where the Bugis here live alongside other groups. The Orang Biduanda Kalang and Palembang Malays, Riau Malays. So this is a mixed group up here. So the Bugis are found here, and then across would be other groups. Yeah? I want to bring our attention to Clyde Terrace, this little bit of reclamation. This was an early reclamation. Imagine the amount of money invested just to reclaim this and put at the end of Arab Street these steps. Can you see steps? At the end of Arab Street in the past, there was a strip of reclamation called Clyde Terrace. You invested money to reclaim land. And then at the end of Arab Street are steps to the water. How does that look like? This is Clyde Terrace. By this time, we've already reclaimed land for Nicole Highway, so you no longer see the steps at the end of Arab Street. But in this image, there it is. This square thing with a bridge to Arab Street. So this is the pier of Arab Street at Clyde Terrace, and these are all the Malay and Bugis vessels. Or it's just written here as Malay Craft Harbourview 1890, something we completely forget. When we talk about Singapore, we always talk about Singapore River, yada yada, this and that. There's a whole world at Kallang Bay which we never seem to talk about. It's really strange for me. And there are all these pictorial kind of evidence. And then, of course, there are these houses, these curious, can you see all these houses? They are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All the numbers. They jut out into the water from Kampung Bugis, right? This particular street. This is already a late map, 1838. So let's move back in time. 1824, there it is, also numbered. Right, that's Kampung Bugis. And even earlier in time, there it is. That street is right there. Okay, if you map it, it's slightly a little bit deviated. But that street was already there. Can you see the street? So that street is what we see here. Kampung. And the street is just called Kampung Bugis. It's not called Jalan or Lorong Kampung Bugis. It's just called Kampung Bugis. So this is a very, very old street indeed. If we have lost all the other Java Road, Palembang Road, Minto Road, Sumbawa Road, we still have Kampung Bugis. But you know what? It's not going to be kept, They're going to make it condo land and demolish the road. So, and some of the houses that you find there, this one. These are large aristocratic dwellings of the Bugis, facing the water. So even in South Sulawesi now, this is very rare. Very, very rare. So in 1863, one very early photograph, this is a very early photograph. We have evidence of this, some of the Bugis. So some of the Bugis did not choose, and this is the difference between, I must put this in right now. The Bugis in the Malay areas differentiate or distinguish between Bugis Peranakan, meaning those who are cultured to Malays, and Bugis Totok, or Bugis Jati, That means those who are, like, these would be considered more Bugis Jati, right? They stick to the adat, the adat as they call it in Bugis, adat. The adat of the Bugis. So, whereas Ambok Sulo and gang, they are a bit more Bugis Peranakan. That means they are cultured to Malay ways. And they even, for example, joined the Kesatuan Melayu Singapura. And just for comparison, this is, of course, 1863. These are slightly later, 1900, 1890, 1910. Examples of the large palace dwellings in South Sulawesi. It's not a longhouse. This is a palace. It's like a hall, a huge hall. Okay. So different groups. So this is a Goa Makassar. This is Luwu. And this is Bone. Bone is another Bugis group. Different from, for example, the Wajok. Some other examples. So this one has, you see the attraction, I wanted to show this because the number of gable panels tell you the rank. Macam like, ni lah. Yeah, something like that. So it tells you the rank. This is higher, this is slightly lower, and this is high. High, high, slightly lower. Yeah. Malays don't do this. We only have one, at most two, but it doesn't mean rank. But we do have something very similar. We call it tebar layar, spreading the sails. In Bugis, it's called timpak lajak. So, very similar. Christian Pelras, who is the late Christian Pelras, who is a researcher of Bugis culture and history, conjectures that Bugis traditional architecture such as these has some distant, centuries ago, connection to Malay architecture. Because he looks at terms like that. Timpak Lajak, for example, is so similar. But the Bugis went off on a different trajectory. They used this to demarcate rank, whereas the Malays never did. So it's a distinction or differentiation. But then some of the houses make it into house building plans. So very quickly, the atap roof by W. Timor, Chinese architect, tile roof house, architect Almeida and Kasim, these are all at Kampung Bugis, Kampung Bugis, Kampung Bugis. So they actually did register, and some have atap and some have tile roofs. In Kampung Bugis, And this one is an atap roof house. The architect was from Kasim. This one is a tile roof house with very substantial and expensive bakau pile foundations. Expensive, this one? A very substantial amount of investment just to make the foundations. Again, in Kampung Bugis for Madam Maimunah. 999-year lease. All that counts for nothing. So when we see this, all these are backward people, living in. This is the kind of impression we have. We have not been able to go beyond that. So I hope by this very quick survey, for example, this Jongket form is very rare, and we actually have examples. Nobody cares. We look at this, these primitive dwellings, Thank goodness the British came and saved us. That kind of thinking, So as I was saying, this is the legacy that we still have. This street, it's still there. Everything else is gone. So, but this Kampung Bugis is still there. So we need to do something about that. It's there. If you look at it in context, Kampung Bugis, in relation to what we have left, Hajah Fatimah Mosque, we are here, the Istana, right? And the third building on the side, Sultan Mosque, everything else is gone, all demolished. This one also not what it used to be. This is the conservation district. And then after that, in 1995, all this demolished. So we are left in the middle, and then north of it is Jalan Kubur also, they don't want to confirm. Yeah? So Jalan Kubur is also hanging in the balance. So that's the kind of conclusion we can make, I think I will skip this. I just want to show, actually there's more to it than that. There's Kalang. Beyond that, you have Kampung Supu, which is supposed to be, but I cannot verify this. According to Sukma Angin, by the author Arenawati, is named after Nakhoda Supuk. Yusupu is the way the Makassarese would pronounce Yusuf. Yusupu. Then from Yusupu becomes Supu. And apparently there was a big pinisi called the Sukma Angin, constructed in 1928. Here, facing Kalang Basin, it sailed the Johor flag and so on. It actually ferried people to Fremantle, that sort of thing, Yeah, that's sort of, so that's I don't know, I can't verify. And unfortunately, Aranawati has passed on. So I can't even try to seek him out and ask, are you serious? Can you tell me, betul ke? Is it real or not? Maybe, maybe he has written memoirs. Maybe I'm not doing my homework. But anyway, that's what he says about this Kampung Supu, okay? And I know there are some people who are from there, so maybe it'd be nice to be able to speak to them. And of course, the larger context of that aquatic town. So besides those large merchant dwellings of the Bugis, there are the more humble Melayu and Orang Laut waterfront houses. So this is also the case, but everywhere, see this pakcik, this man is seated in a water taxi, going home. And then there's also Palembang houses. So this is the Rumah Adat Palembang Limas. So we've got examples. This is Singapore. This is Palembang, but this is a Singapore example. A few examples. So we had Palembang people living also on water. We also have famous Palembang traders on land in shop houses, but we also have those who live on the water. And then we have a modern, so there's two types of, in Palembang, there's the Adat type, the customary traditional, and then you have the modernized version, which is this. This is the modernized version. We also have modernized, can you imagine, this is all a town on water, and that's the taxi there. Super, huh? But it's gone, all of it. But of course, I want to bring us back, and this is the last slide for buildings. Haji Osman Dang Pesantren at Kallang Road. So even at Kallang, you have the Malays, or in this case, Bugis, building shop houses. So never stereotype. Okay, the Malays didn't just live in wooden houses, they also built shop houses. Thank you very much. Last one, huh? So in all seriousness, what we face is an erased, expunged historical landscape. It lives on in name, but who cares about the name? Because you know what? You can just call them Bugis, Orang Laut, pirates and traders. Like that. Sekali harung, as we say, right? Kaup semua, Everything goes lah, So in this landscape, we only have Bugis Junction. Nobody really knows who the Bugis are, and so we can insert all sorts of fictions into the void of ignorance. This is always a concern, that we know so little about the history, right? And we just add stereotypes, and then it becomes official because it gets into sanctioned websites that in today's day and age become reference materials for teaching, learning, copying for assignment, and other forms of proliferation. So it's actually quite a serious matter. So I hope that having gone through all these things that we can no longer see today because of the demolition, it helps us have a different perspective on the matter. Thank you very much.
Okay, now I'm very angry. And also, I don't think I'll ever get over that. Heavy, Dr. Imran. Thanks so much, Dr. Imran Tajuddin. I'd just like to say a few things before I open it up to the floor. Firstly, thank you for highlighting the origins of the settlements and also how later on with colonialism, how that settlement was moved and the different urban, the urban real estates and also the plantations and Kampung Bugis to show that there's a diverse, that the Bugis are diverse. They did many different things. Some were traders, some were perhaps aristocrats even at times, but not fishermen. I think most of our postcards, still our tourism postcards, say that any photos that are by the sea says it's a fishing village or it's a fishing vessel and all that. I don't think I'm from, my ancestry traces us back from Wajo, and I don't think any of my uncles were fishermen, nor my grandfather. None of us were fishermen. Possibly, possibly. Yeah, some of my uncles might be. Anyway, but it got me thinking about how our collective memory is so fixed on the materials that we currently have, and it brought me back to Alfian Saad's, the title of Alfian Saad's book, A History of Amnesia. It is an erasing of our history. It is a forgetting, and not just something so far away, something as recent as in the 80s or 90s, we are already erasing those buildings, those sites. Road names have been changed time and time again. And currently, at Malay Heritage Center, one of the problems we seriously have is to to create programs and to remind people of these different spaces and places and people when those sites don't exist anymore. How do you tell a story when the story has been erased? And where are your evidence? And another thing is also to retell story without the sites. We have to refer to images, photos, and again, these photos and images have those captions. So I do pity my colleagues at ACM. They do have a hard time they don't really have an easy way to reimagine this. They don't have that kind of, I think, awareness or conception, or even the anger that you and I might share to a postcard that simply says fishing village. I think when I look at it, I get very uncomfortable. Even as a child, I was like, no, I grew up in a kampong, so none of us were fishermen. How then that would be presented as truth, as our actual history is a very big problem that I think those of us in this room, hopefully, is definitely my problem as well, because Dr. Imran just reminded me MHC should do something about these things. But we can't do this on our own. And I think we need all the support we can get. And you know, we have some of our docents in here, we have some of our partners who have worked with us previously and maybe in the future, to be ambassadors of our history as best as we can. I have one question that I want to pose to you. Actually, maybe it's two questions perhaps. Based on your research, what were the earliest Bugis settlements that perhaps you could have found in maps, and if or any other form of documentation? How early did the Bugis come here and settle and create settlements? And lastly, if we can fast forward all the way until the recent past, how did all these properties and settlements disappear besides being sanctioned by the state? How did all this property, how did the Bugis lose all this property, and where did they go?
It sounds like a number of different questions, so I'll try to answer them one by one or bit by bit. Okay, to be honest, for Singapore landscape, we don't have enough by way of maps or accounts to really allow us to say accurately, what are the earliest Bugis settlements. Because let's say if I restrict myself to the 19th century, I tried to show those two examples, right? We have Temenggung, of course, Temenggung Ibrahim, the Temenggung Abdul Rahman Daironge, as well as Karang Chandrapuli and wife, Haja Fatimah Al-Bugisi. So those the three individuals, and of course their entourage, their families, for 19th century, possibly the early arrivals to set up something important. Other than that, we have very little to go by. I think probably there are others who will say things like, there's an account saying that Seligi, for example. That I have no way to verify, so for that reason, I don't bring it up. However, I want to bring up another point, and that is that Singapore can be seen as part of a larger domain or territorial kind of ambit, and that includes Malacca from the 1400s, the Sultanate of Malacca, and before that, the Chiefdom of Malacca. Apparently, there are claims, and I don't know how this can be verified, that Bugis established, now of course, the Sulalatul Salatin, better known as Sejarah Melayu, tells us that there was a continuous settlement, right? From, I think, Mua, they say, Mua. And Mua, on the way to Malacca, you will hit Merlimau. We'll come back to Merlimau. From Mua until, I think, Tanjung Tuan, not Tanjung Tuan, Tanjung Keling, I cannot remember, or further up. I can't remember the exact extent, but it's supposed to be a settlement, yeah.
Some claim it's Tanjung Keling, which is Bugis.
Keling, okay, see? Madu Keling, for example, right? So, sorry? Keling as in Madu Keling, yeah, maybe, it's possible. That's why I wanted to bring this up, because there are all these traces, echoes, hints, and apparently, during that 1400s Malacca heyday, that long settlement, right? People stayed along the coast. One of the centers for Bugis settlement during that early period was Merlimau. Apparently, that's the claim. And Merlimau, later on, whether it was the 1400s or slightly later, also had competing Palembang. So it's always these two. In Kallang Bay, it's the same, Bugis and Palembang. In Merlimau, the story was not rosy. And I suspect Kallang Bay might not have been rosy as well. They were rivals. They were just like Teochew Hokkien, always like, I elbow you out at the Boat Quay area, who gets more space. So apparently, in Merlimau, Bugis and Palembang were kind of, not at loggerheads, but they were rivals, so there's a lot of friction. That's one story. So that means I'm looking at Singapore as part of that larger. Of course, the settlement only went up to Muar, which is not anywhere near Singapore. But Singapore had a kind of satellite settlement status. So it's not inconceivable, and this is even before Johor, when it was still Malacca. Singapore had a satellite settlement status. So it's not inconceivable that the Bugis would have also settled somewhere here. The thing is, I don't have evidence, as to what caused it to disappear. Actually, I think many of the properties have not disappeared. They're like the ones that I show for Wakaf. But the rest have either been acquired, demolished, wholesale, I don't know whether that answers your question. Then there are other, let's say, estates. I didn't cover estates. The Bugis had a lot of estate land. So some of these were acquired. They gave away some of them for public purposes. I cannot name them because the person requested me not to say it. So there's one particular Bugis, very wealthy Bugis trader who owned a huge tract of land at Thomson and gave away a part of it for public use to the government. But he requested for me not to divulge it. So that's a teaser for you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to open up to the floor now. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions. So if you do have questions, put up your hand. I'll point out to you. My colleague will pass you a microphone. Introduce yourself, please, and then pose your question. Pandian. Sorry. No, it's not you.
It's on?
Yes.
Okay, Horia is my name, from Romania.
Hi.
2 questions. One quick one. I saw on your map there was a Kampung Rokok and Kampung Laut on the water. Where these were kampungs of stilt houses, or what were there exactly?
Yes, they were, well, to answer you simply and quickly, you were talking about this map. Oh, I wish you could go faster. Come on, faster. Yes, so there would have been houses like these. This is Kampung Bugis. Very similar. I didn't show the ones for Kampung Kalang, but there are also drawings like these for Kampung Kalang. So sometimes architects had to be commissioned to, oh, this is horrible. Okay. Let's get away from this quickly. Oh, where's my map? It's gone. It's conspiring. There it is. Yeah, here we are. You are almost there. Yeah, so many. Where is my map? There it is. Yeah. So Kampung Rokok, there's actually 5. Mariam Ali wrote about this. There are 5. So Kampung Kalang, this is the original kampung, and there are many of these houses here that had building drawings like the one we saw. Kampung Rokok, no drawings, because none of the British officials surveyed Kampung Rokok, but they surveyed the one on, I think they're scared, they didn't want to go out. But actually, you notice this is a bridge. All of these were connected by plankways. Can you see that? Yeah. And then Kampung Laut. Laut, Rokok, Kalang, there's Kalang Pokok and Kalang Pasir, 2 more. So there are 5. So the quick answer is they were all on stilts, but there were many different types. Some were tiled, some were not, some had substantial foundations, some were just nibong. So they use this particular wood type called nibong, which becomes stronger with water, not weaker. Yeah.
Okay, do they have postal codes? I think they did, right?
They did. They were numbered. Yeah. They had municipal MC number something.
Okay, thank you. Second question, where else in Asia, in Southeast Asia, we have Kampung Bugis? Outside Indonesia or Malaysia, where are there other villages? Are there in other places? I don't know, Philippines, Myanmar, Cambodia, I don't know. Further, yes.
Yeah, actually a lot of places and towns do have Kampung Bugis. They do. So it's a general thing. But the special thing about the Singapore case is that there was Bugis town. And then there was a chief in the Bugis town, and it was in one map, there's Bugis town, and the rest are called Kampung China and Kampung Glam. So that's where Singapore case is really, truly quite remarkable. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, very interesting and encyclopedic. I wanted to ask you, if I may, something that is 2 questions that are a bit off-center from your architectural core. But since you have such a breadth of knowledge, I'm sure it's not a problem. So the first is, why is it that the Bugis, it will appear from your talk, seem to have more mercantile success than maybe the Malays and the Javanese and other Nusantara people. Is it because, as you alluded, they were dispersed by the Dutch from a maritime center? Or is there something in their culture that is different that also aids this? So that's one. And then my second question, the Bugis script. Is this some kind of a Malayo-Polynesian script, or is it an Indic script? And if it's Indic, is it more like Tamil, spread, or is it? Thank you.
Thank you. So the first question I will use, so instead of answering it from a personal kind of perspective, like how I personally feel about whether the Bugis, have a great ethos or whatever, I will use historical kind of evidence. So if we compare three big groups in Southeast Asia that conducted maritime trade, they would be the Javanese, the Malay, and the Bugis Makassarese. Now, if we talk about the Malays, the trade peoples of the Malays, they come from the major kingdoms. That means those merchants who are not just peddlers. Many people peddle goods, but there were Malay merchants, truly merchants in the sense of the term. They were based in the major centers, the most major of which was Malacca. The other major center, Patani. Now, both of these were bullied left, right, center really bad. Malacca, smashed by the Portuguese. So there was, before the Bugis and Makassarese dispersed, the Malays dispersed first, because the first colonial conquest in the Southeast Asian maritime region was against the Malays by the Portuguese in 1511. So the Malays went to Makassar in big numbers. Not that they were not in Makassar before that, they were. All right? And then they asked, by 1520, there was a special contract even between a group of Malay traders represented by somebody named Nakhoda Bonang, which is a Javanese name. So the Malay group was diverse. And they said people who tie their sarong in this way, not the Bugis way. And these included people from Patani, Johor, Minangkabau, Pahang, and one more, I cannot remember, 5. So it was very specific. And the great thing about the Bugis rulers, unlike the Malay rulers, is that the Bugis rulers kept daily registers. Can you believe that? Not because of Dutch influence. They kept it since way before. So because of the Makassarese daily register, we know this contract in 1520, the precise day, that this confederation of Malay traders sought permission to have an autonomous ward in Makassar port, where they were exempt from Makassarese adat law, and they could use their own. That means extraterritorial rights, Termetrai, as we say in Malay, it is, kind of encoded. So anyway, that's, if you talk about a historical record, then the Malays were scattered first, right? And then you have the Javanese. Now the Javanese are have a very complicated story to tell when it comes to the demise of their trade port settlements. So along the north coast of Java, there are many pesisir or north coast Javanese ports. They were bullied by two forces. First, the Dutch, who wanted monopoly. Second, Sultan Agung of Mataram. Those of you who love history would read about this. So Sultan Agung and then his son Amangkurat the first, and then Amangkurat the second. Oh my gosh. They were so insecure, they kept destroying these coastal ports so that they didn't get rich enough to challenge the power center in the interior. I'm of course generalizing greatly here because we're talking about decades of developments. But these two twin forces, if you read about it, where did the Javanese go, man, if they had boats? They were burnt. Sultan Agung burnt teakwood Javanese ships. Burnt them. And disallowed the building of new ones. And I can't remember the exact year, in 16-something, it's definitely the 17th century. Sultan Agung banned Javanese shipping. Banned it outright. Sultan Agung, not the Dutch. So that's the Javanese story. The Bugis, on the other hand, did not get, I know the Bugis homeland is quite big, just like the Malay homeland, but the Bugis homeland, the traders came from other settlements that did not so they had other kinds of economic output. The Wajok, for example, they were famous for their silk sarong weaving. I didn't include a story on that. But the Malay Heritage Foundation has an excellent article on this. So you should look it up. It's on the Bugis silk sarong's popularity and importance in trade in early Singapore. People wanted to buy the Bugis silk sarong because they were so well made. And these were produced by Wajok. in Lake Tempe. That's where they
And
there's a Lake
Sengkang.
Tempe in,
And Sengkang.
and Sengkang. Sengkang is the capital facing Lake Tempe on the edge of it. So where was I? So the Bugis apparently, despite the conquest of Makassar, Bone, which is another kingdom, was allied to the Dutch. So they had some benefits to accrue from the alliance. You could argue the Malays of Johor also had some benefits to accrue because the Johor Malays were allied to the Dutch. Weren't they? They were, because in the conquest of Malacca from the Portuguese, Johor allied with the Dutch. But then there was also infighting across Aceh and Johor. So it's a very complicated. I'm thinking as though I was a merchant. What kind of political economic turmoil was I facing? If I had a business and I had godowns, where was I to place these things? In a Dutch colonial port where I had restrictions? If you went to Batavia and you are a Malay or Javanese or Bugis, no way you'll be allowed to have no way. Do you know the history behind Batavia? It was apartheid. The Dutch are known for apartheid and they did that in Batavia. If you were a Malay, Javanese, Bugis, no way could you enter no. This is something we forget when we glorify colonial history. They were living in the Omelanden, the territory outside So it's a very complicated story, seriously, Where would you have had your base? Yeah. And for the Bugis, they had a kind of corporate not that the Malays didn't, I just told you how they went to Makassar and, banded together. The Bugis traveled in bands around a leader. And they set up new settlements, sometimes founded whole new kingdoms. It seems the Javanese did that. Sukadana in Borneo was founded by Javanese in late Majapahit times, for example. But the Malays did not seem to have founded new settlements elsewhere. I don't know of a case. The Bugis did. They founded Pasir at Tanah Grogot, that's on Borneo. They founded Samarinda, which rivaled Kutai, the Malay kingdom that pre-existed. They founded Selangor. And this is what very few people know. The last dynasty of Aceh was Bugis. Just check that out. So now I'm going to the second point. Is there something in Bugis culture? I don't know. Maybe.
Okay, thank you. There's lady at the top there. Oh, the language. Hang on, sorry, one more.
We'll come back to
language.
that later lah. Yeah. Let the question.
Hafiz hilang. Hafiz can talk about the language.
Yeah. Maybe Hafiz can talk about it.
Wafi? Wafi pun hilang. Or they have a trail after this. Yes.
Yes,
question.
thank you very much. Imran, I've learned really a lot. Thank you very much for this great talk. I'm here.
Hi. Hi.
Hi. Can you tell us the answer about that question you asked in the beginning? Why was it called Bugis Town? Was it because and not Kampung? Was it because it was built already by the 1820s in masonry, unlike the other kampungs, which would mean that it was in Singapore one of the first, if not the first, town in masonry, even before the Chinese kampung, the Chinese town, which was at that same time called a kampung, as you mentioned. I don't know if I got the chronology correctly, but can you elaborate a little bit?
The quick answer would be that I do not have the answer about the materials used for the buildings, but I do have an answer from the morphological point of view or the configuration and layout. It seems that the Bugis settlement that was called Bugis Town was well organized according to the compounds of those 20 principal merchants, meaning that they had walls. I wish I had an image of it. If you look at a good map of Makassar from the 1600s, you would know what I'm talking about, or all those old pre-colonial cities in Southeast Asia, towns and cities in Southeast Asia. The kampung literally meant having an enclosure for a settlement with gateways. So it seems that the main compound was Kota Raja, the king. But then there were all these miniature compounds, the kampung of the Bugis principal merchants. So it would have looked like those pre-colonial port towns, with the kind of streets formed by the palisades and the pagar. So for that matter, probably because they established something so quickly, it would have been called town. This is my conjecture. Whereas the other settlements would have been just houses. Whereas this one had the 20 principal merchants who constructed some kind of a demarcation of their territory, which then, resulted. If you look at Malacca, when the Portuguese conquered it, it was like that. It had all these fences for the principal merchants, and so the streets were what remained beyond these, or in between. Yeah, that's my quick answer. It didn't seem to have been because they built in masonry. It seems not.
You want to answer Joe's question on the
Oh,
language?
yes.
first
Also, the
before?
script. So there is a kind of, you can trace the genealogy of it. It's actually supposed to be a version of well, you know, there's the Baybayin script of the Philippines, right? And actually, the Baybayin, no, say there's this particular script from the Philippines, which is a kind of you can trace it back to the Pallava script. You can trace it back. Or was it the Devanagari? I think it was a Devanagari script, I'm sorry. And so it seems to have a connection, but the connection is not verified. So even like, I think De Kaspari did not really have an answer to it. It says that it seems to be connected, and that seems to be like, you can say this particular Sulapa Epa shape is a simplification of this one, but there are some where it didn't seem to match very well. I believe it's supposed to match at some point, but now this goes to kind of part of the answer. It seems that maybe what the Bugis did is to say, you know, this wonderful, Sulapa Epa means the four sides. Epa is empat in Malay, Epa. So Sulapa Epa is like four-sided. So the basic component of the Bugis letters is the lozenge. So it seems at some point the Bugis decided, for aesthetic purposes, let's do away with all these scroggly, squiggly shapes that we have from the Baybayin Philippines, if they indeed took it from that, and standardize it into an aesthetic format, which means to say it was quite sophisticated. And so probably the letters, this is my conjecture. So then all the letters were changed to fit into that Sulapa Epa kind of format. It seems that way from an aesthetic point of view.
The gentleman in green, you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, kuro semangat maiga, machalada. I have a comment and then two questions. The first is a comment on the issue of Bugis town. In the late 19th century, elsewhere in the British Empire, in Tawau, in British North Borneo, there were maps that actually designated a Bugis town there. But this was, I think, at the beginning of the 20th century. But I don't know, I was thinking maybe what was happening in Singapore could have served as a kind of prototype for evaluating what would or would not be eligible for town status in a place like that. The second question is, would it be safe to assume that that early Bugis traders would maintain residences elsewhere, either in the Riau Islands or back home in South Sulawesi? And is there any evidence for early sort of like Bugis community organizations like Persatuan Community Bugis or anything, or were they more informal, accumulating around these male figures? Prowess, yeah. Thank you.
Wow, thanks. So thank you for pointing out Tawau. Tawau is a fascinating example. It's got a very big, major component of the Bugis. A little bit later, as you noted, but there are quite a number of publications on the Tawau Bugis. But back to your question about, sorry, the first question was, I suddenly forget. A Bugis, no, not Bugis town. What was the first question again? No, after that, what you said something. After that, the question was, I forget. Yes, multiple residents. Thank you. So yes, so I didn't quite talk about that because, yeah, well, I just didn't. So for example, what's his name? Ambok Sulo's father, Haji Umar, as well as Daeng Pasandre in particular. So they had bases in Pasir, which I just mentioned. That's the coast of Borneo facing South Sulawesi's Makassar. So the closest to Borneo, if you wanted to set up a colony, is Pasir, Tanah Grogot. They had bases there and property there and so on, and they traded goods from Pasir. They also had a base in Pontianak. Pontianak was set up by Al-Qadri, Hadrami Said, but right next to Kampung Dalam was Kampung Bugis in Pontianak. I've been there and it's really fascinating. So the Bugis supported the Hadrami Said kingdom. You know, it's very, very fascinating. And then, of course, Mempawah is a Bugis dynasty. Sambas is the bullied Malay one. It's always Malay, it's always gonna bully. It's always like that, very funny. Yeah, so very interesting. That coast, Sambas is Melayu, Mempawah is Bugis, and then Pontianak is Hadrami Said with a Bugis backing. So anyway, sorry, I digress, but Pasir, Pontianak, Singapore, that was the network of this particular family. They went back and forth, and then they traded with Surabaya and a few other places. Yeah, And when it comes to burial, I only mentioned the burial at Jalan Kubur, but actually the siblings of Daeng Pesandre are buried elsewhere. One is buried in Pasir, another is buried in, so you get the drift, huh? They spread across. Two are buried in the cemetery we lost, Bidadari. Yeah.
Cikgu Jaafar, you have a question? Okay.
Doctor, you have been going around the central side, about the Bugis in the central side, the eastern side. What about the western side, Teluk Belanga? I know we heard about, because of the royalties and so on, and the present dynasty in Johor will be the Bugis dynasty. And of course, this is what I've got from some of the people living there. There was once, there's Jalan Marang. And it's supposed to be named after the Marang family. And it seems that Mount Faber, original name was Bukit Marang. So when was the name change?
Okay. I have to answer straight. That I have not touched upon. And I think Mr. Sarafian Saleh might have looked at this matter. I have not looked at Marang. But you're right about Temenggung Abdul Rahman Daeng Ronggit. So when he was asked to move out, so I didn't talk too much about that. He was asked to move out, right? So eventually he did. He took up Teluk Belanga. Again, it was in collaboration with established Orang Laut groups. It's always like that. There's an established... Look, when Malacca Sultan established Malacca, it was because the Orang Laut told him, go there. So it's always, the Orang Laut are the forgotten. That's why I made sure I had that bottom bar. Orang Laut already there. They were already there, okay? No matter what, we kind of forget them, but they're there. So actually, Teluk Belanga was a pre-existing settlement with Pulau Brani and Pulau Air Brani and Pulau Belakang Mati. So the palace and the mosque, the palace has been demolished, unfortunately. The mosque is kind of rebuilt, but it's still there. And you're right, they re-established themselves in Johor Bahru. Yes, so that's also a Bugis story. But I guess I didn't talk about that because it's rather well known. And also these are already kind of like a dynasty that did not regard itself as Bugis after a while. Of course, they will invoke their Bugisness once in a while, but they kind of see themselves more as now the Temenggung family of Johor Riau rather than Bugis, Bugis Totok or Bugis Jati.